You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVOL, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVOL Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time to commence a new year here on the TWIFO program. Yes, we're kicking off 2022 by diving back into the mad maelstrom that is the crypto markets. Think we would have learned our lesson in 2021 or 2020 or even back in 2019 when we were doing the show. So, these are crazy. Who the heck wants to talk about these? But nope, we're diving blindly, bravely, pick your adjective of choice over there, back into the world of crypto derivatives again in 2022. Going to talk about the volume, the volatility, the SKEW, the OI, the big trades, all that crazy stuff, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. So, as of course, upon the network upon which so many of you have been binging of late. If you're somehow new to the network on this first session, A, welcome. B, you missed a whole heck of a lot. This January, listeners, is our 15-year anniversary. Hard to believe. Not of this show, but of the network. We created the first options podcast way back, launched it way back in January of 2007, and we're working on it, of course, even before then. So crazy. This is pre-iPhone, pre-really iTunes. I mean, it existed, but nowhere near to the degree it does now. And just insane. You had to have an RSS reader to really get them. So it was a crazy time in this nascent medium known as podcasting, but we're happy to have ridden this wave all the way, and happy to all the people who have joined us along the way, the legions of programs, millions upon millions of downloads later. Here we are, 2022, 15-year anniversary. So look forward to some fun new bells and whistles and additions and all sorts of fun parties and things to mark our 15th year. We're going to be like Disney. We're going to celebrate all year long. Why not? I think Disney celebrates for like a year and a half when they have a year anniversary. I don't know if we'll go that crazy, but we'll have fun. So look forward to that. Of course, if you want to join the party live to this show and everything else we do throughout the week, including our great pro Q&As and our Options Oddities program, you know where to go, theoptionsinsider.com/secret club to join all the cool kids in there having a pretty sweet time. And of course, however you listen live after the fact, keep hitting us up. Those questions, those comments, those insights, those pearls of wisdom we do love to hear from all of you folks out there. And let's see who we're hearing from on the program today. I am pleased to welcome back to the program. Wouldn't be a new year without some old friends. Let's welcome back Mr. Bill himself, a.k.a. Bill ULIVIERI, the principal over there at CENACLE Capital Management. Mr. Bill, welcome back to the Crypto Rundown, sir, for the first time in this new year of 2022.
Happy New Year. It's great to be here. And it is just so many blessings on you and the good work that you do.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. As we keep on rolling, it is time to kick off the new year with a little bit of the old Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
Before we get into all the action this week and kicking off the new year, Bill, this is your first time joining us in quite some time. So let's start there. Obviously, it was a tumultuous, some might say an insane year for crypto back in 2021. What stands out to you as you look back on that year? What were some of the highlights, the lowlights, the trends, the developments that really resonated with you over the course of this past year?
Oh boy, I think on the good side, it would be the installation of Bitcoin ATM machines in El Salvador, the point of sale at the register devices, and the Chivo wallet in the fall of 2021. I think that was super exciting. Probably a little bit of the disappointment that the SEC did not embrace a spot Bitcoin ETF, but again, approved more of the futures-based derivative type of ETFs. I think for me, is a little bit to the downside, but I understand it. Like I'm okay with it. I'm not a Bitcoin spot ETF maximalist, by any means. And I think, listening to the trailer coming into your program about, have we learned our lesson? No, cryptocurrency for me is that flame, and I am a moth that just always goes towards the flame. And we saw the highs in spring in Bitcoin and a lot of cryptocurrencies, and then some of the uncertainty in the regulatory framework came out, where everything could be a security, and many of the altcoins just getting smoked, and when Gensler was talking a little bit more about that. So, some good, some bad, but overall it's still an exciting place to be, and I wouldn't want to be anyplace else.
You are indeed a moth to the flame, Bill. An apt description for you over there. A few more nuggets. We did our kind of big year in review show last week, so check it out if you haven't listened to it yet, listeners. But some other nuggets that kind of occurred to me as I was looking at some of the data points kicking off this year. Looking back at last year, we talked a little bit about how crazy the year was last year in January, but some additional data points just to ram that home for you. Bitcoin, I think to say it started off the year last year strong is a bit of an understatement. It gained nearly 40% in the first week. It blew from 30,000 all the way up to 40,000 in the first 5 trading days of January. I mean, think about that. Not that long before that, certainly within a calendar year, it was trading less than 4,000. I mean, so just think about that as we kicked off last year. And that, of course, got everyone all fired up. Not everyone, I should say. There were people, obviously, who were on the other side of that, big investment firms. When it started hitting the 30 to 35,000 level, people coming in saying, oh, well, there's not enough institutional demand to sustain those levels. Of course, we saw that clearly was not the case. If there wasn't, the retail made up for it in then some, because it continued going north. And of course, we didn't even talk about last week just the whole Musk effect on all crypto, but Bitcoin, of course, as well. I mean, just for example, he added the hashtag Bitcoin to his Twitter profile last year. Bitcoin rallied 11% just off that. So, I mean, these ridiculous things. Then, of course, when he announced Tesla was taking Bitcoin, that sent it off to a new level. That was really one of the catalysts that sent it on the march to the 1 trillion market cap out there. Of course, he also stuck his finger in the Doge pie as well. Doge also had a pretty rock'em sock'em January last year, nearly 600% just in January of last year. Outperformed pretty much every other major and indeed minor crypto asset out there. Only Link and XLM were even close to it at 110, 149% for January of last year. So intriguing stuff. Of course, we also saw, well, a lot of people thought maybe was the big watershed moment for the space, which was the Coinbase IPO out there April 14th, the day before tax day last year. It looked pretty good to start off. Had a reference price of $250. It IPO'd at $381, so was looking pretty good. It started trading off of that pretty quickly. I think it ended that day somewhere around 340. And that IPO, that coin IPO, really kind of coincided with at or near the top of what we saw out there with crypto. And then, of course, you saw that sell-off as suddenly people like Musk suddenly awakened to the environmental issues of crypto. Apparently, these things have had an environmental impact that someone who runs a clean energy company wasn't aware of. It seemed kind of strange, but hey, that's kicked off the sell-off. China, of course, banned it. We saw talk of a tighter regulation here in the U.S. as well. It was kind of a 1-2-3 punch that really kind of gut punched crypto in the middle of the year last year. And then in June, El Salvador said, "Hey, I'm going to step in. We're gonna buy the dip. We're going to start taking it as our legal tender, and that's going to be enough to support it at 50,000." Of course, it turned out that wasn't. The El Salvador news really wasn't the bellwether that a lot of people maybe thought, the turnaround, the catalyst a lot of people were looking for. It couldn't really outdo what China was doing. And so we saw the sell-off continue out there. So there's a few other nuggets. I'm sure you folks have a bunch you want to chime in with us as well. So if you have your own thoughts, your own ideas, what resonated to you in the year that was Bitcoin and indeed crypto last year, hit us up, let us know. You know where to find us at Options, most of the major social media platforms. If you're listening live, you can hit us up via the live chat, all sorts of ways, questions at theoptionsinsider.com. That all works. Let's get into this week's price action, kicking off the year a little bit lighter than we closed the year. On our last show, listeners, we were almost 51,500, about 51,453. Coming into today's show, a little bit shy of 46,600, 46,596 coming into today's show. So taking a bit of a respite down, not quite 5,000, about 4,850 handles or so out there. We saw a little bit of a range out there this past week as well. Of course, our last show was the high, 51,453. And I got our low actually on New Year's Eve, 45,663. So some interesting stuff to parse. Let's start there now, Bill. We've looked back a little bit on the past year, but let's look back on this past week and indeed how we're looking to kick off the year here. What is catching your eye this week in the Bitcoin world, sir?
Well, from my perspective, Bitcoin on a technical, a brief technical look, seems to be a little bit below the middle of its 10-week moving average. So I have it around 56% oversold on a weekly basis. It did just turn slightly positive in its momentum. And I think that there's some great option opportunities in Coinbase, some at-the-money cash secured put selling or covered call writing, selling put spreads. It just seems like there's some really attractive levels to, get into the there's Bitcoin or the altcoin space. I don't know. It just seems like we've had this swing from the far right side of the bell curve, like positive 20, 25, 30% on our weekly. Then we got down to about a negative 55% oversold. And now I'm beginning to see a little bit of positive momentum in a few select tokens. So, I don't know. I think I'm pretty optimistic right now for Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies for the next, maybe 12 weeks or so. I think they're going to be a good trading opportunity.
Well, if that's not enough to make you excited, listeners, and Mr. Bill, we have one of the listeners in our live chat who he's very excited about SHIBA. And he says, if SHIBA hits it high, Mr. Bill, he's promised Lambos for everyone. So what do you think? How's that sound? He's going to be like Oprah. You get a Lambo and you get a Lambo. So does that make you a little more excited, Mr. Bill?
Oh, boy. Dogecoin and Shiba Inu are two tokens that I really struggle with, to be honest with you. I don't know, maybe I'm just too old to enjoy the meme stock status. I just think there's so many positive and awesome, life-changing, world-changing, poverty-changing, freedom-changing tokens out there that for me to get distracted in that space, I don't spend a lot of time there. But I will say that, I do own a little bit of Shiba just for the fun of it. And I think for me, it's a perpetual lottery ticket. I mean, why would I spend $50 at the local gas station or $20 or $10 buying a lottery ticket that gives me a one chance opportunity with 220 million to 1 against odds for a one-time drawing for, say, a few $100 million, when I could buy the same amount of Shiba Inu? It lasts forever. It's on a blockchain. It's like a forever lottery ticket. And if it hits big and goes anywhere near what people think it's going to go, I'll make way more than a couple of $100 million. So for me, I think Shiba and Doge are like the perpetual lottery ticket that always, I'll be able to live a lottery chance, for the next 30 or 35 years. So that's the way I'm looking at it. I'll have a little bit in my wallet, but I'm not betting my retirement on Shiba Inu.
I like that. Perpetual lottery tickets. That's a good way to think about it. They don't expire, at least. You're right. At least not.
It's an option that never expires.
Not that we've seen, unless they have some new wrinkle to SHIBA coming for it. It expires at the end of the year. But outside of that, yes, perpetual lottery tickets. By the way, our listener who's promising the Lambos, I like a nice red. I prefer, if possible, a nice Lamborghini Countach. Let's go back to the 80s. Get one of those sweet, sweet ones. A nice red with a little black stripe. I think you know what I'm talking about there. So I'll put my order in now for the SHIBA Lambos. So you want your SHIBA Lambo. I'm guessing that offer is limited to people who are part of the secret club now. Newcomers, of which we've seen a lot of you out there. Maybe that offer doesn't apply to you. I don't know. When you get in the secret club, you got to ask and see if the Lambo offer still applies. Let's get on out to the vol out there right now and see what's going on out there. And it's been outside of the shock moments, the sell-offs, the mini flash crashes and things, outside of those moments, we've seen a pretty much long, slow progression to the dark side on the vol front. That has continued this week. We were at about a 72 last episode. Coming into today's show, 67. So down another 5 points in Bitcoin vol out there. So the erosion continues on the vol front. So everyone out there who's thinking, Bitcoin is synonymous with volatility, it can get pretty frothy. It can get pretty volatile. And when it wants to move, it can move. But over time, we've seen that vol looking a lot more like precious metals vol these days, particularly gold, maybe a little bit of silver, where effectively you have these spikes, but then it tends to languish in that one range for quite some time. Coming into today's show also, by the way, all of our analytics we're going to talk about today, or let's just say most of them, coming at you courtesy of our friends over there at Genesis Volatility. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. I say most of them because most of them, except for this, when we have BitVol, which is our buddy Mr. Simon Hose, who was just in the hot seat to end the year last year. Hope many of you enjoyed that. If you haven't checked it out yet, check it out over there. If you're part of the secret club, if you're not, theoptionsinsider.com/secret club to get access to your exclusive podcast feed and everything else. You can listen to that episode. A lot of great questions about volatility and crypto on that session. If you look at his BitVol, which is kind of analogous to a Bitcoin VIX, that also has been eroding. It was at 81.5 on our last show. Coming into today's show, a little bit shy of 73, 72.94. So that downward vol trajectory is continuing. SKEW-wise, we've seen a little bit of a shift back to the positive. It has been negative for a little while, back to positive 1.3. Not much, but some positivity out there. And we're seeing something similar with the BitSkew, Simon's BitSkew, his newly launched index over there at T3, 91.6 coming into today's show. If you want to see how that stacks up historically, T3index.com is the place to go to learn more. Now, Bill, one of the interesting things about Bitcoin and in ETH right now as well, something that when we had Greg from Genesis on the show a little while ago, he pointed out as well, is we saw this cliff coming pretty soon in Bitcoin options, which was fully half, close to it, of the OI was going to go the way of the dodo at the end of December expiration. And I was hard pressed to think of any other major asset class in the option space I can think of that was so heavily laden in December and front month expiration. That was all going to go away. And that's pretty much what we saw coming into today's show. Now the OI is down apocalyptically from our last show. We have calls now over there on Deribit. About 90,000 calls open only on Deribit right now. That's down a whopping 63,000 from this time last week. I mean, December's gone. It took over 115,000 contracts with it. The puts are down to only 40,000 contracts open. That's down almost 25,000 from this time last week. So you only have 130,000 contracts open right now on Deribit. Bill, what are your thoughts on that? The fact that Bitcoin options were so December heavy. We saw so much OI rolling off the board. And off the top of your head, can you think of any other product that you've traded that was similar to that?
No, I don't think so, Mark. You're right. It was a huge number that rolled off the board. And I think historically we've seen this happen before in some, even the traditional asset classes like the S&P 500 or Russell 2000 OEX. I mean, we see these huge numbers, and then expiration comes off. We have like 3 days of, repositioning, and then, we begin to see the open interest, pick up between, say, the third or fourth day after expiration into, the cycle. So I suspect, I don't really know 100%, other than I'm wondering if I'm just wondering out loud that a lot of options could have been hedged in Bitcoin just because of anticipation of, 2022 volatility. some uncertainty to the current administration's stance on cryptocurrency, potential regulation in the world, because, as Bitcoin goes, everything goes. Therefore, as everything goes, kind of Bitcoin goes. So maybe it could have been some, I'm going to say somewhat correlated pairs trading that was, some of that option open interest was in. And then also the stock to flow ratio predicted Bitcoin would be at around $100,000 per token by 12/31. And we totally didn't even get close to that. So I'm not sure. I'm not that interested right now. It's not that I say that I'm not interested. I think it's interesting that the open interest came up, but I'm really interested to see where it begins going back on again. Because the theory is, from what I hear and from what I see in my crypto Twitter, is that the whales, the big Bitcoin holders, they're hanging on, right? They're not hedging. They're not selling. They're just building up this huge bag of Bitcoin for the next upside move. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Interesting. Speaking of upside moves, and you mentioned the regulation. I was going to save this for the questions, but I'll get to it now. This came in through our live chat. Mr. Luigi, glad to see you could join us. Luigi, weren't sure you were going to be able to make it. He says, I wanted to ask Mr. Bill what his thoughts were about this. I heard a pundit recently say that we might see Bitcoin drop to 20,000, even though the industry is super strong, before it rockets up to over 100,000. The reasons that person cited were that it would follow a cycle of price discovery with new industry disruptions after new regulation is adopted. So, Mr. Bill, what are your thoughts on apparently new regulation driving Bitcoin back down to 20,000, and then new disruptors coming in and driving it back up over 100,000 afterwards?
Well, my perspective is, again, I always look at things technically first, then trying to figure things out fundamentally. So on the high end of the range, I've got Bitcoin, based on its volatility, around 69,846 to the upside. The middle of the bell curve is 54,700, and the downside of the bell curve is around 38,800. So as long as we stay within those three levels, I don't really look that much at the fundamentals. But I will say this: the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, it treats Bitcoin as digital property. It's not considered a security. It's not considered a currency. It is like a real estate investment trust. It's like a piece of property. So we have to look at it through the lens of the fact of how the IRS designates it and treats it. And I would certainly encourage anybody listening to this podcast to listen to Michael Saylor, who's the CEO of MicroStrategies, and how Bitcoin fits into treasury management for S&P 500 and high market cap companies, right, rather than keeping their money in a checking account. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself in the whys. All I really care about is what is. And I don't really care about the why. I know a lot of people like to think about that, but I don't. I just want to know what is. And for me, what is we're a little bit to the below the middle of the bell curve, where we traded up at 67,000-ish in Bitcoin. That was at the high end of the range. So from my perspective, we're just middling. It's like, for me, it's just not a big deal right here. Until we get below maybe 30,000, if it could, and it could trade down that low, but I don't think it will.
Well, let's see how low the OI got after all this December rolled off the board. Remember, I said December took over about 115,000 contracts were open on our last show. Right now, the number one spot is January with only 34,000 contracts. So the options took a huge hit at the end of December, which will be interesting to see how the new and remaining OI, how that stacks up. We'll get to that in a second. Number two is March with about 31,000. That's up, I should say, about 2,100 contracts. And then again, nothing else is even close. And you could add up the top five probably right now in terms of open interest, and they probably would maybe equal what December had on the board. And again, maybe not even that level. So yeah, a lot of OI went the way of the dodo since our last episode, listeners. And we saw that reflected now. I mean, our top five in Bitcoin in terms of size positions, what are the strikes that are dominating it? That top five has remained, especially the top of that top five, has remained locked to the same couple of strikes. The par strike in particular has been just this object of fascination and magnetism out there. That is no longer the case. We've seen big changes, big shakeups to our top five now that December has gone the way of the dodo. I was speculating whether the par strike would maybe get cut down to size a little bit once December went away, and that was indeed the case. The new number one strike, listeners, is a far more relevant strike. It is the 50,000 strike that has 9,200 contracts open. So that is the new big dog in Bitcoin options. That's down a whopping 300. So not much of a change there overall week over week. It just shows you how everything above it just got annihilated. And again, that was our number five last week. That jumped all the way from the bottom of the list to the top in the span of 1 week. So a lot of change up here in our top 5 positions. Number 2 is the 70,000 strike. That has 8,900 contracts remaining, down about 3,100 from this time last week. Number 3 is our old friend, the par strike, the 100,000 strike. That got cut pretty much in half. That had over 16,000 contracts open last week. It's got about 8,300 open right now. So I was wondering how many of those pars were going to be in December. I kind of assumed there was a lot, and it turns out there's about half. The par strike now down to number 3. Number 4, another more relevant strike, the 40,000 strike, becoming a newcomer to our top 5 here with 6,400 contracts. And number 5 is the 80,000 strike. That has 6,200 contracts open. That's down about 5,000 from this time last week. So a lot of shakeup. And let's see what else can maybe start percolating up there. It's good to see a little bit more relevant strikes, the 40K, the 50,000, the things where we're actually trading. That's a little bit more interesting to me than these ridiculous 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 strikes that have kind of just dominated the options landscape for so long. Speaking of that landscape, it is a lot smaller. You don't need me to tell you when pretty much half of the OI rolls off the board, the notional value of the remaining OI is going to be less. And that's pretty much what we saw. It got cut almost in half. Notional value of the OI on Deribit last week, listeners, was $11 billion coming into today's show. $6 billion. If you look at this graph, listeners, it is like a cliff. It just falls right off. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes up. Still, we saw a lot of the OI fall off in all the venues. It wasn't just Deribit. The number 2 behind, actually, no, CME is still holding firm, though. CME has 261 million. Obviously, their expiration cycle a little bit different over there in the options on the futures than what we've seen on some of the other venues. So they didn't have as much front-loaded in December as some of the others did. Also, they haven't been in the options game as long. So a venue like Deribit had years to build up the OI on December, whereas CME did not. So CME still has 261 million worth of notional OI open, whereas the other venues are all hovering below 90 million for the most part. One other thing we've learned about notional value of the volume out there is that Bitcoin and ETH, they tend to like holidays. That's where the volume really seems to spark to life. On our last show, listeners, we were talking about Christmas Eve being the most active day, 1.1 billion worth of volume changing hands. Well, this week it was New Year's Eve. Same deal, 1.1 billion going up. So we had a Christmas Eve party and a New Year's Eve party to really wind down the year for us listeners in terms of volume out there. Mr. Bill, I'm going to head into CME land now. Have you been paying more attention to any of the products going up on CME? I know the futures for a while were intriguing to you because they were a regulated offering. Then, of course, you got the Grayscale Trust and everything else. Have you had a chance to really been paying attention to what's been going on over there at CME of late, sir? Well,
I do look at the CME numbers now and then. And it's really interesting because I'm at the CME website right now looking at the E-mini S&P 500, the EOM or the end of month options. Their open interest dropped 884,000 contracts, Mark. So it's really interesting that we've seen a huge drop off, a huge fall in open interest, even in the traditional side, right? Calls 229,000, puts 654,000. So I find that also interesting. But I've always loved what the CME group is doing. They've got they're ahead of the game. They didn't leave the party a little bit like the CBOE did. And so again, I look occasionally at that world, but again, most of my focus really is in just the actual Bitcoin price and Ethereum movement. There was some micro futures that started trading.
They launched micro ETH a couple of weeks ago.
The micro ETH, right? So I find that really interesting. And again, more and more adoption, little by little, and I think that's exciting. So there's no such thing as bad, press in the cryptocurrency space. And again, we're seeing more and more adoption in traditional exchanges. So I think I like that.
Yeah, you mentioned SIBO. They're kind of getting back in the game. They bought ErisX, right? So we'll see. Maybe that'll lead to some new products coming from them in the near future as well. The more listed products we have out there for you folks to trade, the better out there. Let's look at some of the listed ones on CME. It's actually a decent week to end the year. That party on New Year's Eve seemed to lift all boats out there because the options on CME, I'll have to check to make sure. It's maybe the busiest day we've ever seen in the options. Over 313 trading on the 5X big ones out there on CME. They traded on New Year's Eve, I should say. It doesn't sound like a lot, but again, that's a 5X contract out there. I'll have to go check the numbers to make sure. But if that's not the busiest day, it's certainly in the top 5 out there. That's a pretty active day. The OI is also skyrocketed. Put that in air quotes because it's a small number, but still the OI has jumped up from about 1,500 to nearly 2,000 out there. So big day on Friday for the options. Weirdly enough, not so much on the futures. The big futures only doing about a little less than 5,000 contracts out there, which is nothing. That's a rounding error for them. They've done much more than that. The OI is down about 1,000 to 12,000. So seeing a little bit of OI come off the board, but nowhere near what we've seen on the deribit front. Micro Bitcoin futures, same deal. The OI is down 3,000 from this time last week, but still nowhere near the 50% we're seeing out there in places like deribit. The volume, again, kind of light on Friday for the Micro Bitcoin futures. Only about 12,000 contracts. As we keep on rolling, I know it's Mr. Bill's favorite portion of the show. It's time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, listeners, let's do it. Let's explore the crazy portion of the market, aka the altcoin universe. Let's go back out to our top 10. To kick off the year, we've gone back to a traditional top 10. Our producers have stopped extending it to include SHIBA and Doge. Like that, don't like that, hit them up, let them know, send your hate mail to them, not to me. All you Doge and SHIBA hodlers out there. Number 10 this week is Polkadot at about a little bit shy of 30 billion worth of market cap. Number 9 is Terra with 33 billion. Numbers 8, our old friend XRP with 39.7 billion. Number 7, USD Coin, 42.6 billion. Number 6 is Cardano, 44, almost 45 billion. Number 5 is Solana, 52.75 billion. Number 4 is Tether, 78 and about a half billion. Number 3, Binance Coin, 86.2 billion. Number 2 is ETH, 447 billion. Number 1, the big dog, once again, shy of the 1T level, 879 billion out there. Mr. Bill, when you're not watching the big dog, which is Bitcoin, have you been paying more attention to ETH these days, sir?
I have. I've been keeping an eye on ETH, keeping an eye on Ethereum Classic, really interesting projects. I will say, however, that there's a lot of displeasure in the cryptocurrency world at the fees that are being paid in Ethereum gas. Like whenever you do a transaction, when you want to mint a non-fungible token, if you're using Ethereum, if you're sending Ethereum, the fees are incredibly high, almost to the point of, people second guessing, wondering if they even want to transact or send, cryptocurrency through the network. So I look at that because I'm concerned that there is, around $250 billion locked up in total value locked, in cryptocurrency, in Ethereum, and Ethereum seems to be losing its majority first adopter win. So I find other tokens and other chains interesting, but I want to keep an eye on Ether because it is one of the big dogs, and I'm a little concerned about what I hear going on out in the world of cryptocurrency, specifically with Ether. Interesting.
Maybe some of the alarm bells going off. You're right. I have been hearing some of those out there. I know a lot of people on the show lately have been all up and excited about Avalanche. Is that one of the ones that's been on your radar, Mr. Bill?
No, not really. I mean, I look at it a little bit like I do all tokens. I know that, Polygon, Matic, I think is the symbol. I mean, gosh darn it. Hold on a minute. There's so many symbols that I'm sorry, Mark. I'm having a little bit of a senior moment here. It's Polygon, Matic. I look at that one a little bit. For me, I'm not looking at the individual tokens so much as what sector are they in. Like I find that sector, like the gaming sector, or is it privacy token? Is it Web 3.0 data management? Like for me, I go there first and then look at what kind of interesting tokens there are. So, I just look at things different, Mark. That's all. I can't say that. I just find it interesting that in every sector that there are some really cool tokens, to look at and to potentially nibble on.
Well, let's see if any of that is reflected out here in the number 2 out there, which is ETH coming into showtime. You have a bit of a sell-off out there in ETH as well. Last show, a little bit north of the 4,000 level, about almost 4,100, about 4,090 or so. Coming into today's show, 37.56. You're down a little over 330 on the week here. We had pretty much the high for the week being our last show And then the low coming on the 29th, 35.87 out there. So pretty much exactly a 500-point range on the week, which is kind of interesting. Getting into the vol, again, same story to what we saw in Bitcoin. Vol mostly continuing to erode. Last show was 81% on ETH. ETH, again, usually a little bit structurally more volatile than Bitcoin. Right now it's at 75%, so it's come down about 6 points over the course of the past week. The SKEW pretty much unched about 1.3 on the positive side last week, 1.5 this week. Not a lot of evolution there. Where we did see a lot of evolution, and again, we talked about this in ETH recently as well. Same deal, that same cliff that was looming in Bitcoin was also looming in ETH. ETH has always been very quarterly heavy. Pretty much any given week on the show, you're going to hear the quarterlies dominating the open interest in ETH options. So December has been a big position for a long time. That, of course, went the way of the dodo, and it took quite a bit of OI with it. The calls on ETH on Deribit, there's only about there's a lot, but still, there's about 1 million almost exactly open right now. It's down about 340,000 from this time last week. The puts are down to 273,000. That's down almost exactly 200,000 contracts. So you lost over 500,000 contracts just in those two over the course of the past week. So that's a lot of paper to roll off the board. Obviously, the notional value of that OI took a huge hit this week as well. Even though similar from a volume perspective, we saw a similar trend on ETH that we saw in Bitcoin, which was they both love a holiday. We saw a lot of action on Christmas Eve, I should say, and New Year's Eve on Bitcoin. And in ETH, we saw a lot of action pretty much all the way leading up to New Year's Eve. On the 29th, we saw nearly 600 million with a notional volume going up. The 30th, 700 million. And the big day was New Year's Eve, 741 million. So the week continued to ramp up into the end. Of course, coming into the beginning of this year, it's fallen off a cliff. Everyone is hungover from the big New Year's holiday out there. But on our last show, we talked about, again, the OI, going back to that OI falling off a cliff. December had nearly 1 million contracts open, had 870,000 contracts open on our last show. All of that is gone now. So our number two is a distant number two, with March now number one with 420,000 contracts. That's up about 25,000. It still has a long way to go to catch up to December. Number two is June at a paltry 227,000 contracts, and there's nothing else even remotely close out there. Interestingly enough, we didn't see the enormous evolution in ETH top positions that we saw in the Bitcoin options. Number one is still 15,000 strike with about 105,000 contracts. That's down about 15,000 contracts from last week, but not enough to really move it substantially down our list. Number two, the 10,000 strike still hanging out there, 98,000 contracts open. That one took a hit. That's down 23,000 contracts from last week, but still sizable enough to remain at the top or near the top of our list. Number three is the 20,000 strike. This is one of the new additions this week. This one popping in this week with 88,000. I don't think the OI really changed a ton on this one, but just the fact that a lot of the other ones have come down quite a bit. This one was able to sneak into the top five this week. Number 4 and 5, we have a tie. Both of them exactly 70,000 contracts. It's the 6,000 and the 7,000 strike kind of coming into the tie for the bottom of our list. The 6,000 strike has 70,000 contracts open. That's down nearly 30,000 from this time last week. So that one took a big hit. The 7,000 strike, I don't know the change because it's a newcomer to our list. So again, we don't know the change on the OI there, but both of them tied right now at 70,000. So a little bit of evolution in our ETH top 5, even though perhaps not as much as we saw out there in Bitcoin land. In terms of the futures over there at CME, not exactly a huge amount of evolution. With ETH futures, their OI is down about 600. That's it. It's about 4,200. Not a huge change there. Not a huge amount of volume going up on Friday either. Only 2,500. The micro ETH futures, they've been an interesting story to watch. Again, they just launched on the 6th. If you want to deep dive into those, check out the episode of TWIFO, This Week in Futures Options, I did with Tim McCourt from CME recently, where we did a deep dive into why they're launching these now, all the mechanics and nuances therein. So check out that episode if you haven't done so already. That OI has been growing steadily since the launch. So a bit of the opposite story to what we saw with everything else, where December took all the OI with it. The OI is just growing in the micro ETH futures. It's up to 22,300 right now. It's up over 10,000 from this time last week. So not a bad pace considering it just launched on the 6th of December. Before I get into some other altcoin, Mr. Bill, whenever you join us on the show, you've always got some interesting altcoin in your back pocket that you're keeping an eye on. What's on your radar in the altcoin universe these days, sir?
Well, thanks for asking, Mark. All right, so I'm definitely late to the party listening to Joe Rogan podcasts, but and he's done like 1,700 podcasts, and I've just listened to my first 3 or 4 recently. And I also noticed in crypto Twitter that he is preparing to be deplatformed on YouTube. So there's this new social media platform called Getter, Gettr, Getter. And it just made me think about how many voices out there, considering what's going on over the last couple of years, whether you're a politician or maybe someone with an alternative perspective on things. And it made me think about the Theta network. So Theta is a huge, it enjoys a lot of retail adoption. Basically, it is a decentralized video streaming and content delivery network. The symbol is Theta, THETA, and it's an options trader. I'm sure you love the fact that we're bringing our friends with familiar Greek names into our cryptocurrency holdings. But it's a really interesting blockchain protocol that improves the process of creating and streaming, consuming content online. It uses a native token, a Theta token, that is used to incentivize, people who act as peers, or whether you're using your computer in shared bandwidth, providing, support to the network. It has something that's called Theta Fuel, which is a token that you have to expend or burn when you're sending, this token around through the network. So I find it kind of interesting that the concept of, if Web 3.0 is basically, we went from like Web 1.0 was like read only, and then write only, and now it's read, write, and own. So looking at Web 3.0 tokens, that Theta is one of them, where content creators could actually own a greater participation in monetizing their content, I find interesting. So right now I'm looking at Theta as a potential play. And also from a technical standpoint, it's about 55% oversold. This momentum just turned positive. It's down about 70% from its all-time high, around 15-ish maybe dollars a share in April of 2021. So it's just, contrarian play, and just something that seems really interesting, because it does seem that privacy and being able to own and manage your own video content is something that is interesting to someone like Joe Rogan, who is, probably, I'm guessing, maybe one of the number one Spotify content creators.
He's up there. We fight with him on Spotify every week, but he usually takes the crown over there, Mr. Bill. But that's why I like having you on the show. You always have some interesting altcoin. And I got the name Theta. I gotta love that, right? That's
gotta
right
love that. Any option traders gotta love Theta.
I might have to buy some just for the name alone, just
right?
to say I own Theta. And people are like, oh, how much you paying every day? Oh no, I just own it. It just goes up.
I spent my whole life collecting Theta. Now I'm buying it.
Exactly. Now give me all your Theta. I'm buying all of that. And if that confuses you listeners, check out some of our educational content, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. It'll make a lot more sense. Let's get on out some of the other altcoin outside of Theta. What are some of the altcoin you folks are watching? Hit us up. Let us know over there. XRP, of course, on the radar of some people, even though a lot of you can't really sling it yet. It had a bit of a sell-off this week. It was 94 cents on our last show, 83, almost 84 cents. So off a little over a dime this week. Dogecoin taking a bit of a break as well, down a little bit shy of 17 cents. It was a little bit north of 19 cents on our last show. Litecoin, same deal, about 159 on our last show, almost 160, and about 148.66, so a little over 11 handles to the dark side. This week, Cardano also taking a break, down 21 cents to about 134. Polkadot also relaxing this week, off not quite 2 handles, about $1.83. Coming into the showtime today was about $30.30. Solana can sell off. It is possible. It was $200.50 on our last show, $170.50 this week. So down almost exactly $30 on the week. And good old SHIB continuing to erode. It was 0.000039 last week, and this week it is 0.000033. So a huge hit. Unfortunately, no Lambos this week for the live crew. We shall see. As we keep on rolling, let's see what you folks have in store for us. A little bit of your crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
Well, before we get some of these questions people have sent in to us, our live chat's got a bunch of stuff popping off here. First, I did not realize they're chatting about apparently you could have gone to Paris Hilton's private island, New Year's Eve party on her metaverse private island. I did not realize that. So thank you for making that aware. And you could have gotten NFTs apparently during that. So I was not aware of that. So there you go. Our chat always on the bleeding edge of this stuff. Speaking of bleeding edge, Mr. Bill Nichols in our live chat wants to know if you have tried BITO options yet, sir.
I have not tried BITO options yet. No, I have not. Again, I've said this before on previous episodes. I like the grayscale products. BITO is interesting. I need to feel good about what I'm doing for clients, and I haven't really looked that much at the BITO. I don't know. It certainly was a lot of hype around it. The assets under management was just incredibly attractive. I mean, jealous beyond of what they've been able to raise. But no, I'd have to say that I'm focusing, for any options that I trade really are Coinbase options. It's the plain old technology stock. It's kind of brick and mortar technology, crypto space. They've got 5 or 6 different silos that are positive. So when I want to take a shot on the brick and mortar pick and shovels of crypto, I do cash secured puts in Coinbase. If I'm buying it just outright for clients, I'm buying the grayscale products for now.
I know you like a good collar. The tight collars in BITO wasn't enough to lure you to the dark side, sir.
No, I'm a little bit boring like that. I stay with the person that brings me to the dance. And so for now, until proved otherwise, I'm going to, but I'll look at it. I'll be honest with you. I will take a closer look at it. I'm not completely against it. I'm just saying I need to, the spread width is certainly attractive. I mean, goodness gracious, you've got a super tight market of, maybe 6 cents wide in the at the monies, 3 cents wide in some of the out of the monies. The return, if the static returns are attractive. So say, for example, you were to sell the January 29 option, you're making like 6% over the next 19 days, theoretically, right? The static rate of return, it gives you about a 5.6% downside protection. Same with the Feb 29 strike, 11% return, static return over 47 days. How can you argue with that? So I'm okay with it. I'm good with it. Those numbers you can't really deny. But Coinbase does have a market cap of 54 billion versus a few billion of AUM, I think, in BITO. So I don't know, just a philosophical thing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's just a personal thing.
You mentioned coin options. I mentioned at the top of the show, listeners. Of course, Coin went public back in April. They had the reference price of about $250. Then it IPO'd at $381. Well, it's back right now. It's trading almost exactly $250, about $251 again. So it's pretty much right back at that reference price that it hit. Challenging period ever since the IPO. That is not the low out there by any means. The low has actually hit 208. It looks like that was back in maybe July of this year. So it's had a challenging run over there. So not also off the lows, but intriguing stuff out there. I got Mr. G asking, when can you buy XRP on Coinbase again? I don't think anyone has a clear answer for that one, Mr. G. I was just doing some digging here right before showtime again. It's like some people are thinking there's some hints that the SEC may finally come to terms with this deal, maybe by April. So there's some hope maybe into Q2 of this year we could see a resolution of this one way or the other. I know they did just appoint the head counsel for their XRP, their lead counsel of the XRP lawsuit. The SEC just appointed them as enforcement counsel, so they got to bump up. So maybe that's a sign that that thing is coming to fruition out there. But it seems like the tea leaves are pointing towards something in the first half of this year. Again, that's just the tea leaves, Mr. G. That could mean nothing. That could be accurate. The whole thing could blow up. Who knows? But that's all I'm hearing here for now. Let's go out to Todd and MST. They both have kind of related questions. We can kind of take them together. Todd wants to know, do you expect an ETH ETF to hit this year? And MST wants to know, with all these ETFs hitting the market eventually, will all these ETFs hitting the market eventually cause the Grayscale Trust to go away? So maybe we'll start with the last one first. Mr. Bill, I know you're a big fan of the Grayscale Trust. What do you think the impact of all these ETFs launching will have on the Grayscale Trust? That's what MST wants to know. And then, as a related question, Todd wants to know, you think we'll see an ETF hit this year, sir?
Well, if you would have asked me this question every January 1st since 2017, I would say, yes, the ETF is coming this year. Yes, the ETF is coming this year. And so, yeah, 2022, I think the ETF's coming this year, and it will be a spot ETF. And I think it was around December 17th of 2021, the SEC said that they were going to review the idea of a spot exchange traded fund in 45 days, which would put that somewhere near the beginning of February. So while I'm not focused that much on XRP, I am going to be following the ETF, the potential spot ETF. And I will tell you this, again, I get all, crypto, Twitter is where all the crypto conversation is going on. And there are some incredibly powerful voices on crypto Twitter that are going to be donating money to regulatory, like the regulatory bodies that help promote and get the voice out for cryptocurrency space, that there really isn't a good reason why we don't have a spot ETF based on other spot exchange traded funds that we have. And so I think that the answer is yes. I think we're going to get a Bitcoin ETF this year. And I do believe it's going to be super exciting. And I hope to hear something in the spring of this year. There's just so much pressure being sent and forwarded toward the SEC. And let's be honest. I mean, I don't know how to say this without sounding kind of fringe, but I think about the trading floor, Mark, where a lot of the traders, a lot of the broker dealers, like everybody's gone. And so how do you if you're a regulatory body whose operating budget resides from the government and from fines and arbitration and things like that, like why would you shoot this cryptocurrency thing when it's this future parallel universe that already has a market cap of a few $1 trillion? Why would you not somehow embrace that and bring them into the conversation and bring them into the regulatory framework? So I think that they have to be careful, but to avoid the cryptocurrency space and not bring them in would be like financially suicide, in my opinion, for the SEC and other regulatory bodies. So I think it's going to happen. They just have to be careful and act accordingly.
Well said, sir, on that front. I think Todd also asked about an ETH ETF. I think we'll probably see one of those sometime in the near future. It'll probably be something similar to along the lines of what we saw with the Bitcoin ETF, which is, of course, on the futures at CME. It's not a spot ETH, but that's clearly CME's game here at the way they're structuring these products. They want to lure ETFs into the conversation. That's why they went with the big multiplier for the Bitcoin futures, and that's why they went with the big one to launch ETH as well. Now they have micro. I think it'll take a little while for the ETH ecosystem to reach the levels we're seeing out there in Bitcoin as well, but I would not be surprised to see an ETH ETF based on the CME futures hit sometime towards maybe the latter portion of this year. Good questions, everybody. That music means we've come to the end of another epic sojourn through the world of all things crypto. But before we go, Mr. Bill, if our folks are intrigued, they want to hit you up, talk about different altcoin or your outlook on Bitcoin or ETH or anything else crypto, where should they go? What should they do, sir?
Well, I think it would be great if they could text the number 22828. Text the word blockchain to 22828. That's the word blockchain. Text it to 22828 and sign up and get our newsletter, right? So we try to send a newsletter out every 14 days or every 4 weeks. And, we touch on a little bit of everything that you and I kind of chat on, in these podcasts. And it would be a great way to help, spread the word on cryptocurrencies and focus on Grayscale and Coinbase product, because I think that's still the main place where the conversation is happening. Crypto, Twitter, Coinbase, Grayscale, and that would be great. I'd love to have you on board.
There you go. Check it out, listeners, over there. You can also give him a follow, easy for me to say, over there on the old Twitters at CENACLE Capital, at CENACLE Capital, all one word. And of course, you know where to go to kick the tires and light the fires on all of these analytics we were discussing throughout the show. It's just gvol.io, GVOL.io is the place to go, listeners. We got to get on out of here, but don't worry. If you're in the secret club, you can join us tomorrow for a great pro Q&A over there with Carly Garner from DeCarly Trading. She's written a bunch of books on futures options trading. So if you have a lot of questions about futures options, how they work, how you should be trading. I know she was pretty big on NatGas the last time we chatted with her. So some intriguing stuff to talk about there. Get those questions in now. If you're not part of the Secret Club, you want to join in that session, all the future ones to come, all of our options oddities episodes, as well as participate in our giveaways, everything else we do over there. theoptionsinsider.com/secret club is the place to go. And we'll see you back here next Monday, listeners, another episode of the Crypto Rundown.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.